Donald Trump is repeating his threat to let the free trade deal with Canada and Mexico expire.
To me, I think it's better without it. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of it. We do better without an agreement.
Do you want to just leave it enrolling?
I would rather leave it unsigned. I'd rather have it terminated. I would rather not have the agreement, but I may sign it.
Right.
But we do better as a country if we don't have an agreement.
So are you thinking of?
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe we won't be able to make a deal. I would rather not have the USMCA. I would prefer not having an agreement, but I'm open to doing it. We'll see what happens.
The Trump administration has until July 1st to say whether it wants to extend the trade deal. Canada and Mexico have already said yes, and Mexican negotiators have started talks with Trump's team. Trump did not hold a formal one-on-one with the Prime Minister at the recent G7 summit, though Mark Carney says they did speak a number of times. Trump's chief negotiator met on the summit sidelines with the Canada-U.S. Trade Minister. We are glad to have in the studio with us today Erin O'Toole. Many people will know him as the former leader of the Conservative Party, now a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations. Good morning.
Morning, David.
Okay, we've heard Donald Trump, we've heard the U.S. president. Do we just sit there and go, oh, this is his play at negotiation?
We should. Yeah. I've often used, I'm a Gen Xer, I use the Star Wars analogy.
Go on.
Stay on target. Remember Gold 5 when they were going into the Death Star? Stay on target, stay on target. That's what we have to do. So there's going to be a lot of negotiating posturing. There's going to be a lot of these attacks or late night tweets or truths. We have to focus on jobs and getting tariffs down and making sure that the Americans know that CUSMA is just as good for their economy and getting costs down as it is for Canada. So as we approach July 1st, and even afterwards, I think we're going to have to ignore some of the attacks or slights and focus on the sectors where we can help the Americans and where they can help us and make a real deal.
We know that there are discussions that are happening. They're at a lower level and they can be very technical. But the fact that those are happening when the U.S. president comes out and says something like this, and he's going to again, and he has before, is it a reflection of how discussions are going inside a room, or is it just him being him?
It's him being him. I've said to a number of people, there's going to be two real portions of a deal we need to get with the United States. There'll be the negotiated portion that Janice Charette, our negotiator, and the USTR, Jameson Greer, are negotiating. Really point, rules of origin, the nitty-gritty of trade. But there will be an executive-level decision that the president will make. And the president will want a narrative. He'll want to think that he's extracted a few things from Canada.
Yep.
He'll want to show that he's gotten rid of what he perceives as unfairness to the U.S., and he wants to see Canada stepping up on everything from defense spending to the Arctic. So we have to manage both of those things. And on the committee, we're giving advice to the government on how do you manage both the negotiations at the table and the wider narrative of how important Canada is to North American defense, the supply chains for the Americans, cost of living, energy, all these things that the president needs to understand because he will ultimately bless the deal. So I do see some of the Prime Minister's interventions at the G7 trying to keep the president in line with what the negotiations are doing.
I mean, the best scenario, I suppose, would be that the president and those in the administration believe they have extracted concessions while we have offered very few concessions, if any. But some of those irritants are they don't want to make cars with American automobile companies in Canada anymore. I mean, do we lose that? Do we have to give up on dairy supply management? Where are the potential gives here?
Well, you hit it, David. We need to let the president feel he's extracted a win, but it's actually not a loss for us. So I use energy as an example often. You know, our oil and gas can actually help the Americans with energy security, with costs, get cost of living down. So Keystone XL always comes up with the president. But on auto, the auto industry and the supply chains for steel and aluminum are also being used for defense. The U.S. are behind China on shipbuilding, and that's been a real issue for 10 years in Congress. Those same supply chains, why break them up? They can help make a competitive auto industry. They can also help the U.S. with some of its rearmament for defense. Our critical minerals can help with military need and with electrification. So we have to sell ourselves a little bit more strategically. I was there under the Trudeau attempts at CUSMA, and we didn't manage that executive relationship with the president well. This time, I do see the government taking a more serious approach. But with President Trump, we're also going to have to persevere through some of his interventions.
Yes, that's one way to put it. I suppose, what have we learned then in between the approach that we once took and the one that we are now taking as a country? What have we learned about, in particular, dealing with this president?
I think the biggest thing we've learned is the U.S. concerns about China. The last time, under Ms. Freeland and Mr. Trudeau, we were quietly trying to broker a free trade agreement with China. At the same time, the U.S. were saying we don't want to see Chinese dominance in rare earth minerals, critical minerals, steel and aluminum. And we didn't align our tariffs. We didn't approach it as a Fortress North America, that you hear that term. Now we are. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, we aligned on tariffs with China. So the one thing Prime Minister Carney has to be very careful on, and you saw him talking to the president about this in France.
Chinese EVs.
The Chinese EVs. We're finally in line on a North American approach to what we see as disruptive trade practices from China on what the president now calls critical minerals, metals, steel and aluminum. Canada's aluminum supply for almost 100 years has been critical to the United States. So we can't, because the U.S. is pushing us away.
They have a tariff on it.
They have a tariff on it, and it's causing aluminum shortages with the Strait of Hormuz crisis as well. So I think we have to realize that some of these initiatives the Prime Minister is looking at with China may have to be tossed in the negotiating discussion on CUSMA, because the U.S. relationship is critical to our economy. China is very important for agriculture in a couple of sectors, but we cannot run into the arms of China because the U.S. is giving us challenges. And that's the balance the government has to take, and what our committee has said to them, because the people of our committee that have employees in the U.S., they're hearing these concerns about Canada and China. So I do think the Prime Minister is walking a tightrope. So far, he's walking it. And as a Canadian, I want to see us walk it successful and get a deal that will help particularly workers. I used to represent auto workers in Oshawa. I know how worried the auto parts sector is. So we need a deal, and I think we're putting forward both the negotiation table and the relations with the president to get one.
Erin O'Toole, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.